good evening and welcome. This is PJNET.TV. I'm Coach Prasick, and we've got kind of a last minute edition tonight, and we are very fortunate. And thank you to a mutual friend that kind of connected us. But tonight, our special guest is a retired general. His name is Jonathan McColmn. And General, we had a little chance to speak earlier before we went on the air, and everybody's talking about the Iranian conflict, and you and I both concur that if you want to understand this, you got to understand it started almost 50 years ago.
Absolutely. This is so very critical in history and how this thing evolved. Iran has continued to be a threat, if would, to the Middle East, especially to Israel and the United States. And to the United States, we know that the Covert Towers and where the military, where the Marines were killed, and how we found and learned the use of three backed proxies: Houthis, Hamas, and Hezbollah, which operate in southern Lebanon, on the Gaza Strip, and also in Syria. That Iran has continued to be, perhaps, I would say, destructive to the United States. I can recall even when I was in Iraq, assigned to Iraq in a deployment, that Iraq was responsible for improvised IEDs, we call them, improvised explosive devices. And these devices maimed and killed many U.S. forces. And I would tell you that we've really had to deal with Iraq. And when I was assigned to Army Central Command, we've had to really safeguard and watch U.S. forces while serving in the Middle East.
It's really convenient to compare Iraq and Iran, but two countries, although they have some surface similarities, but we can't compare our conflicts in the theater of war with Iraq and apply that to Iran, can we?
Oh, absolutely not. You see, there's this word, it's called hegemon. Hegemon means, it denotes that country in the region that has and wants and desires to be, we'll just say, the bulldog in the Middle East. And Iran has grown and received our support in history, and then of course not receiving our support somewhat as a frenemy. But then we have the competition between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and that influence was there to act as the really big host, the really big official country that determines the direction in the Middle East. And Israel, unfortunately, or fortunately, I'll say, Israel has been the blot to prevent Iran from absolutely executing all that it wants to do. Although Iran has, as we aforementioned, used its proxies to continue to make life miserable for Israelis and, of course, for the United States while serving there. So Iraq, no real comparison. Iran has really been the backup and kind of the one starting the big fights and keeping the unrest going in the Middle East.
Well, and so many people are quick to point to Osama bin Laden, as the big leader of the terrorism that the world and the United States has endured. But it really, if you trace it back further, it's Iran. They were initially heavily exporting and supporting cells and groups that are now, they've got their own names. You mentioned, the Houthis and the,
Hamas
yeah.
and
I mean,
Hezbollah.
those people wouldn't exist if it weren't for Iran.
No, that's absolutely correct. I think Iran has used that as its power. Iran knows that it's like the country that wants to continue to execute its wishes, but it executes those through those we call them proxies.
Yeah.
And Iran has armed them and been able to hide their hands, especially with the Houthis. Iran has armed them, and the difficulties that Israel has experienced, that the United States, comes as a result of Iran continuing to fund these groups. And we find that now today, of course, Hamas really created the atrocity when it actually was the country that invaded Israel back in, I think we recall October 7th, a few years back, and caused the unrest, and Israel retaliated and has, for the most part, pushed Hamas back, although it's still alive. in the Suez Canal on the eastern shore of Israel, southeastern shore of Israel.
We'll get to that point in just a minute. Until Trump came along, there was a sort of an adage that you would hear about Iran that they've never won a war, but they've never lost a negotiation. But that don't work with Trump.
Uh, Absolutely not. Look, we have a great commander in chief, and I know you hear the different comments, and it's unfortunate. It's one of the things that I do have that we regret in the United States. That of course all decisions have a base in being a Democrat or Republican, which means that we're often not together. We have even right now the Democrats are truly finding this to be just a bad thing. Although when other presidents who were Democrats and or Republicans did the same thing, especially if we talked about the War Powers Act, there was no complaint. But now that Donald Trump has made a determination, I think he does things that other commanders in chiefs would not do. Things that we've talked about, things that other commanders in chiefs have dreamed about doing that would soften up or make life that much better for people in the Middle East. No one would do that, such as Trump, an example, moving Jerusalem. So
Mhm.
much of a discussion.
Mhm.
Now we have this Iran. We've talked about Iran often, year after year after year.
Mhm.
And yet no one had the guts or had the plans to actually execute those things that we're seeing today. Well, it needs to happen so that we can perhaps look at trying to establish some form of peace in the Middle East and to prevent Iran from, of course, harming U.S. forces, which has taken place constantly.
I get a lot of my news out of Australia, General, because they actually, even though they're a pretty liberal nation, one of the things they brought out is, everybody thinks about their pocketbook. This is how it's going to
Yeah.
affect
Oh, yeah.
me. And of course, everybody's saying, gas prices are going to go up, and actually they will. But one of the
Yeah.
things that I learned is that gas prices are not directly going to go up because of this. You know why? We're energy independent.
We are. And 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 that's a good thing. And that's one of the things we were hoping for, that we would have energy independence and such that incidents such as these we won't be impacted. And I don't think that the United States will be impacted. Unfortunately, oil is traded on the world stage, on the global stage,
Mhm.
and so we see the prices. Now we knew that there would be some kind of an impact. We would see the rise of prices, but I think that's going to settle. And as I aforementioned, I don't think that as much as we're hearing conversations and we don't like to make predictions, but I believe I read a comment today that said that this thing is moving a little bit faster than we anticipated. And it
Mhm.
probably has a lot to do with the fact that Iran doesn't have leadership. One of the key things that the United States did was to remove the command and control, which is critical
Mhm.
to any incident. Take out the command and control, the ability to execute command, and Israel, I believe, had that responsibility. So, as a result of taking out multiple layers of headquarters or of command, Iran now seems to be indiscriminately firing off weaponry without any know-how or understanding of where they're firing their weapons. Even firing on their own vehicles, their own ships, and firing off even on their own Muslim brothers. Something that they often would definitely not talk about doing. So
Yeah, they've
very
become
interesting,
quite the
this scenario.
pariah, even among nations that should be in alignment with them. They have acted in such a way, and not just recently. This is historically. A
Sure.
thing that has come up now and then, let me finish up on the pricing thing. Any pricing increases that we experience, one will be softened for the reasons we've
That's
already
right.
talked about. They'll be delayed, but they are inevitable because the people we trade with will be impacted and their prices will go up, and that'll get reflected eventually. But that'll be softened. So I don't see this as an economic problem for the United States. You also touched on something I want to briefly elaborate on. There's all this talk about the War Powers Act, as if the president has his hands tied and can't do anything unless he goes and asks Congress permission. That's not what the War Powers Act says, nor is that historically, since World War II, been the case.
Hey, look, we go through this every time a commander in chief execute his executive authority, which is one of his number one and major responsibilities as president of the United States in his commander in chief's role. It is to, as the executive agent, it is to manage and direct those, if necessary, kinetic influences throughout the world where necessary. We can look, the last time that Congress declared war was World War II. So that means several conflicts have taken place then, and the War Powers Act is the means by which that was used, and it was used by Democrat and Republican presidents. So we hear the noisy uproar from one party, and I believe that there might be perhaps a jealousy in the sense that why couldn't we do this? Because the other party didn't have a leader that was precise, that understood the holistic piece of the world and could understand how things turn. Donald Trump has exhibited that he has that ability to see this and carpe diem, seize the moment while we have the opportunity to make something happen that has never happened within recent times, at least.
One option that Iran has in the short term is to basically close the Straits of Hormuz. Good idea, bad idea?
Bad idea. Look, if the man who has two good feet would not want to shoot one of them off or amputate the one. So Iran understands that the way that it's been able to actually acquire weaponry and do the damage that it's done comes as a result of selling oil, its own oil. So in shutting and making an attempt to close the Strait of Hormuz is only a self-inflicted wound. Perhaps they're looking at it as in a tactical sense, how they could perhaps gain some advantage by harming commercial shipping or the fifth U.S. fleet, which is in Bahrain, and of course the other ships that are there in support of this mission. I believe the Lincoln and Ford strike groups. So I just think that it's a dangerous scenario, and that can only happen when you don't have leadership, or when all of your leadership has been removed, and indiscriminately somebody whom we don't know is making these decisions, these irrational decisions that only impact Iran itself. Yeah. So it's just silly, and when you really think about this as an option.
General, I've been watching quite a bit of news from a variety of sources, and I love hearing the perspective, of people who have some knowledge of military matters. And very few people are generals. You are a retired general. What does your experience? Why should we listen to you? You were a general, but how does that give you some insight into the current situation in Iran?
Hey, look, I think your question is a very good one, and it's consistent with why I'm running for the Georgia U.S. Senate. I believe that one of the problems that we have, perhaps in the United States, even among some of our elected officials, is that we're electing people who don't have experience, a breadth and depth of experience that will help resolve issues. As a retired general, I bring to this table, the 35 years of academia experience in the military and in the free world, and the experience of actually living in countries and understand geopolitical incidences and how they impact the United States, both internally and externally. We have our tools of influence, whether we use diplomacy, information, military, or economic policies. And the reason that I know that is comes as a result of the experience in the bilateral talks that we have with those countries in that area. And I happen to have had the opportunity to do those in Kuwait with then Secretary Pompeo, where I was engaging with the Kuwaiti Ministry of Defense. So bringing all this apparent knowledge helps us when we need it the most. But what happens when you don't have individuals who have this expertise, when our national security is one of the number one issues of how we work in the world, and the president needs that help? And not having that experience means that, unfortunately, we will not be able to exercise our authority and have our influence, use our tools of influence throughout the world.
Well, I was wondering how we were going to segue into the latter half of the program, and we're down to about 3 minutes. But you've already kind of helped me out because, yes, you have a unique perspective with your military experience, but you want to put that to work for all the people, specifically the people of Georgia.
Yes, absolutely. Look, I'm running for the Georgia U.S. Senate because I believe that we can do so much better, not just in the line of national security, but with so many different areas, with our economic policies, with the things that impact people, the medical things, the mental illness, those things that are so very important. Respecting life, having someone who has that breadth and depth of experience would, I believe, brings a balance to the Senate, because when you have also a military guy, we understand a couple of things. My role is to find the problem, define the problem, and fix the problem. Well, that's the pragmatism that comes with being a soldier. I don't care about the color of the person on my left or right, or the gender. All I want to ensure is that our weapons are pointed in the same direction, so that we don't commit fratricide against each other. And that's what I think we're doing right now in the United States. Sometimes we're committing fratricide because we don't have people who have commanded a lot of people and understand the extraordinary difficulties in working with people who like you and don't like you. But what the goal is, we've got a mission, we've got to fight, and we've got to win. And that means pulling a team of people who are differently together, so we can resolve our problems or come up with courses of action to resolve our problems. As a U.S. Senator, I believe that I can do that, and I can make the difference in Georgia if I can get the Georgians behind me to also help veterans and our military bases, our non-military bases in Georgia.
Wrap up question, one that I did not prepare you for. First of all, we share Christian values. We are both born again believers, as many of the viewers that watch this program are. And I have seen this time and time again, very good Christian people saying, I want you to elect me. I want to go to Washington, D.C. and change Washington, D.C. Unfortunately, you know what typically happens is the opposite. Washington change. How are you going to shield yourself against that?
Well, I've got to give God the credit for that, having a biblical worldview. And the demonstration of that is in the military. I think the military taught us a lot of things. The first is that the military gives you a check. That's what you get paid. A general officer acts like a chief executive officer, because I commanded, my largest command was about 6,000 soldiers and sailors, soldiers and civilians. So I'm able to work within those confines without looking for kickbacks or those things that could harm me. I know it's important. And do honor country means so much to the people. It means God and country. It means going back to the basics, the fundamentals of the Bible, the fundamentals of the Constitution, the fundamentals of the Declaration of Independence. You hold those things to be true. They mean the most to you as a soldier. And we hold on to those values, which is why so many people want to hire military when they're out. But I come with a strategic experience, so I'm ready to work on the behalf of the people to fix problems with the biblical worldview, going back to the basics of the Constitution, the Bible, the Declaration of Independence, and those things that made our country great.
Yeah, in fact, we actually met because we're both involved with the Mordecai Mission, and the
Mhm.
purpose of that organization is to place Christians in position of political office, whether it's county commissioner, school board, or the president of the United States, and everything in
You bet.
between. And
Mhm.
you've been very special in that organization, and we look forward to it. We are out of time, but folks, I have put his website, his campaign website address on the screen. It's right there, JonathanMcColumn.com. Um, just before just 30 seconds. If I went there and went to that contact page and filled it out and hit submit, would I hear from anybody?
Uh, you would see a lot there. You would see me there, and you'd see folks that need some help, some funding to help get through this thing, and you'd see a lot of information about some things that are really near and dear and important to you. I think you should go there and find out. Check it out for me.
All right. Well, we couldn't possibly cover it all, but we covered a lot, General, and we appreciate you making your time out of your campaign schedule to come visit with us on a lot of stuff that had nothing to do with your campaign. And we appreciate your insight, and we'll have to do this again. Obviously, we can't cover it all, but thank you for your appearance tonight, General McCollum, And we hope to have you back at some point, and good luck, and hope everybody will visit your website and get to know more about you.
I'm grateful. Thank you so very much.
Amen. Well,
Mhm.
a special surprise appearance from General Jonathan McColmn here on PJNet.tv. All right, well, before I leave, we'll have Casper Stockham coming up in just a few moments. And while we're waiting on him and me doing a bunch of things, I have an idea, something that's helped me a lot through the years. Ask yourself 2 questions in order. Number 1, what is the boldest thing that you have ever done for Jesus Christ? Now, you don't have to run for U.S. Senate, it can be something else. But having answered that question to yourself, follow it up with this question: how long ago was that? Whatever you do, however you answer those questions, let's all challenge ourselves to never be satisfied with our answer to either of those 2 questions.